talk her down, trying to figure out what was going on. Of course, my heart was sinking further with every second, because I was presently lying to her. Next thing I knew, she started sending me files. At first, I didn't notice what I was looking at as the pictures started being transferred through. And then I saw my road. My little back road in the middle of nowhere. I tried to brush that off and thought that it could be any road. I asked her why she was showing me this. I clicked more pictures when she didn't answer right away. I saw my dog in my backyard. My dog then I had used for pictures of Bill's dog because he had the same breed and it was convenient to make things more believable. Then I saw my house, my mum's car sitting in the driveway. Everything was so familiar. There was no way that I could have been mistaken in what I was seeing. I messaged her then, asking, "How did you get this?" By that point, I was sure that I didn't even have a leg to stand on. I was prepared to come clean about everything and apologize profusely. But more pictures came through, and these ones were the ones that ruined me. She sent me pictures of me, taken from outside my window. Pictures of me on my laptop with Bill's account open on my screen. Pictures of me wearing jewelry that I had shown in pictures because it was the same style he wore. Pictures of me typing on Yahoo Messenger with the other people I talked to's names showing in the tabs. It was the last one that got me the most though. It was a zoomed in picture of me wearing the same shirt that I was wearing that night. My back to the window and my laptop screen showing the picture of my house that she had sent me moments earlier. I shut my laptop slowly, getting up from my chair without looking to the window. I walked out of my room to talk to my mum and told her not to go outside, but to call the cops immediately. They arrived about 20 minutes later and couldn't find anyone on the property or any footsteps. But they found a knife then they took in as evidence. I deleted all of my catfish accounts that night, got rid of the phone number that I was using to talk to people, and never looked back to see if Daya told people what happened. I never heard from Daya again, but that moment was absolutely terrifying. I still have nightmares about that night sometimes, and I still wonder what would have happened if Daya had gotten close enough to me. I know I've made some horrible choices, and I should be punished for what I did, but I don't think I deserve to die for it or anything. To this day, I can't listen to Tokyo Hotel without getting chills up my spine, as Daya's messages flood back into my brain, which sucks because I have a tattoo dedicated to the band. A little backstory. I'm a female, and by now 30 plus years of age, but this happened back when I was 16 or 17. I had just started going to a new school, and we, my mum and I, had just moved from a big house to a small apartment so that we could afford to travel more and it was closer to my school. To understand the story, here's a basic explanation of the apartment. When you enter from the front door, my room was at the end of a long hallway to the left, and directly facing my door was the entry to the living room. My mum's room was directly to the left of the front door. Facing her door was the short corridor to the kitchen and the bathroom. And well, the money we saved from moving to a smaller place wasn't worth it in the end. So, on to the story. Soon after we moved in, both my mum and I started to get depressed. The apartment never really felt at home. My room in particular was always cold for some reason. My mum tried to fix the radiator, but as soon as we got it going, it broke again. She even called the landlord to have him fix it, and he did. But 2 days later, it went cold again. My mum was still working late some evenings, and since we live in the north, it gets dark rather quick in the winter. I had just come home from school, made some lunch and sat down on the couch to watch some TV. Now, from the couch, I can see into my room, since the living room is facing my room. When I sat there, I got the distinct feeling of someone watching me. You know, when the hairs on the back of your neck stand up and you get goosebumps. I looked into my room, expecting to actually see someone, but the doorway was empty. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was looking back at me angrily. I looked back at the TV, trying to ignore the feeling, but it just wouldn't go away. So I moved to another place on the couch, not visible from my room, and the feeling stopped. Another time, I was chilling in my room listening to some music on my portable CD player. Again, this was in the early 2000s. MP3s weren't as affordable as today. I was reading a magazine while listening when suddenly the music stopped. I looked at my CD player and it was paused. That's odd, I thought. I pushed play again and the music started up again, but only for a few seconds. I found it strange since my CD player had never done this before. I pushed play again, only to find it pausing itself yet another time. Now I was starting to get agitated. "What is wrong with you?" I muttered. I took the disc out and restarted the machine and held it in my hands, looking at it, and pushed play. The music started and I put it down beside me and picked up the magazine again. The music was going on for maybe another minute when the CD player started acting up again, pausing itself. Now I was really irritated. Maybe it's the batteries. I went out of my room to get some new ones. Just as I stepped out of the room, I felt really warm. I hadn't noticed it, but I was cold. Like I'd been standing outside in the cold weather without a jacket. As I said before, my room was always cold, but this happened during summer, so it shouldn't be that cold. I thought that I could sit on the couch with my mum since it was warmer in the rest of the apartment. I sat on the couch with my magazine and CD player, and it played as usual. I thought, great, it's working again. When it was time for bed, I had forgotten about my CD player acting up, and went to bed thinking that I wanted to listen to some music before I fell asleep. I had pushed the play button when it got paused again. I got really agitated again, and said to myself to get a new one since it's fucking broken. A few days later, I was doing my homework in the kitchen, and I've always found it relaxing to listen to classical music when I do my homework. Since I was sitting in the kitchen, I figured I'd give my CD player another try. I hadn't bought a new one yet, and it worked fine. No problems at all. Maybe it's just a coincidence it's working now. Hours later, when it was time for bed, I took the CD player with me again to see if it was still working, and I could listen to it in my room for a good 15 minutes. Then, suddenly, it paused itself again. What the fuck? Maybe by now, I should have seen the connection with the pausing only happening in my room, but I thought the CD player was just broken. But a few days later, it was going to get worse. The night that this happened, I'm positive it was a Friday, because I had been to school that day, but we were free the next day. I can't remember much before bedtime. Usual day, I suppose. But what happened in that room that night, I will remember forever. To understand the situation, you need to know some stuff about my room. My bed was in the corner to the right. As my nightstand, I use a dresser that is higher than a normal nightstand. My room could never get pitch black, since my blinds are white and thin, and there's a street light just under my window. Now, I know I was asleep when a noise made me wake up, but slowly, like when you're underwater and slowly rising to the surface. A muffled voice yelling. I can't make out what it's saying until I reach the surface and hear the phrase, "And people like you," in a female voice. At these words, I opened my eyes and looked into something black. I remember thinking, where is my dresser? Sounds kind of stupid, but that's what came to mind. I look up to see a shadow leaning over me. This got me so scared that I grabbed my covers and pulled them over my eyes. As I did this, I could feel it getting pulled to the bottom of the bed, so I held onto it as hard as I could. And then, I suddenly felt a huge weight upon me, so I couldn't move. And there was this noise, a real ruckus, like everything in my room was vibrating, like an earthquake. When I dared to open my eyes, I'm floating above my bed, and I can see my entire room. I also see two shadowy figures at the end of my bed, with long arms and crippled legs. To the left of me, I see a big shadowy figure leaning over my body, and everything was moving. Like all the particles within the furniture and walls were alive. I'm sorry, but I really can't describe it any better than that. And all of a sudden, everything went black and quiet, like turning down the volume on a stereo, and I once again felt the covers in my hands, and a gentle stroke at the back of my neck, catching some strands of hair, like someone was gently sliding my hair between their fingers. When they let go, everything was quiet again. It took a long time to convince myself to open my eyes, and when I did, there was my dresser, and the room was bathing in the light from the street lamp. It must have been a dream, was my first response. I turned on the light with shaky hands, and when I looked closer at my hands, they were white as snow. Now, I'm naturally pale, but this was different. My hands were white, like all blood had left my veins, and shaking. It must have been a dream. I kept repeating to myself. It must have, or I'm going crazy. I don't think I need to tell you that I didn't sleep much more that night. I turned the TV on mute and watched whatever was on because I didn't want to go back to sleep. Come morning, when I sat down at the kitchen table with my mum, she immediately saw that I wasn't all right. "You didn't sleep well, honey. Are you getting sick? You look pale. Were you in my room last night?" No. Why would I do that?" "I don't know, just to check up on me or something?" She was just looking at me weird. "No, honey, I wasn't in your room last night. Why? Did something happen?" At this point, I just broke down in tears, not knowing if I was crazy or if something actually was in my room, or if it was a very vivid dream. My mum comforted me and asked me to tell her what happened. I know that I'm lucky to have her as a mother. She always believes in me. After all, she has raised me to always tell the truth. After I was done with telling her everything, she left the room and fetched some paper and a pen. "Do you think you can try and draw what you saw?" "Maybe. I'll try." And as I drew, my mum's eyes never left the paper. When I drew the two figures with the long arms, she sat down, put her hand on her mouth and just stared at the paper. After I was done, she studied the drawings for some time. "You know, you drew something similar to this when you were 6. The only difference is, you said you didn't like their eyes, that they were staring at you with their big eyes when you tried to go to sleep." I was baffled. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because it kind of went away with you getting older. Don't you remember that we switched rooms because you didn't want to sleep in the big room? You said that the toys were moving on their own, so I slept in your room and you in mine." Now that she had mentioned it, I did remember. I started sleeping in my mum's room for some time, but then we switched back. It was so long ago that I had forgotten, but she continued. "When you suddenly started sleeping in your own room again without a fuss, I just kept quiet, not wanting to spark something up again. But now that you're older, I can tell you. Do you remember the man who looked like Robin Hood?" "What?" "When you were maybe 4 or 5, you told me about a man that came to visit you sometimes, and he had a cape and a hat with a feather, just like Robin Hood. I owned some Disney books of various kinds, like Snow White, Robin Hood, and other classical tales. And when we read Robin Hood, I had apparently told my mum that the man had the same hat as Robin Hood, but honestly, I had no memory of this." "Well, do you remember the little girl then? She had on a blue dress and a blue ribbon in her hair, and she really liked your toy horse." Still dumbfounded, I said, "No. You were very detailed in your description, and you spoke to them. I could sometimes hear you having long conversations, answering questions and telling stories. At first I thought it was just you playing, but when I listened outside your door one time, I could have sworn that I heard another voice. So, I believe you. Mum, I don't want to sleep in that room anymore. You don't have to. We'll switch rooms, just like we did when you were little. I'm not as susceptible as you, but believe me, I've also seen and heard a few things." From then on, we switched rooms, and I really want to tell you that that was the end of it, but there was still one more thing to come. We only lived in that apartment for a total of 9 months. My mum managed to get a small house outside of town. Sure, it would take me a longer time to get to school. That was a price that I gladly paid to get away from that place. I still had school, but helped pack up as soon as I got home. As I said, I really wanted to get out of there. Mum had taken a few days off to finish cleaning the apartment and packing the rest of our stuff. Some guys from a moving firm picked up our furniture. My mum was taking the last few boxes in the car and driving to the new place, where I was to meet her after school. She made sure to repeat it several times to me so I wouldn't forget. After she had cleaned the room, she closed the door to keep track of which room she had cleaned, and also to keep the movers from entering her newly cleaned floors. I had 3 boxes in my room with some of my stuff, and she had 2 in hers. While the floor in the living room was drying, she figured she would carry the boxes to the car. So, she opened the door to her room and carried her boxes to the car. When she got to my room, however, the door wouldn't open. She said it was like someone was blocking the door or something. She gave it all she could and swung the door open. And just then, she said that she felt a hard push in the chest that actually made her stumble backwards. This made her choke, but she was angry, and she shouted, "You got what you want, we're leaving!" And with that, she walked in and took one of the boxes, and nothing else happened. Now, I highly doubt that this was sleep paralysis that both me and my mother experienced, but after this happened, nothing of this magnitude has happened since. It was the summer of 2005, but this experience is burned into my memory as if it happened last month. I was in college, staying for the summer at school at an off-campus house rented by 4 of my fraternity brothers. As such, it was a boisterous house, lots of people coming and going, frequent parties, often loud music, all those sorts of things from young college-age kids. This house was built in 1930, nothing remarkable, located in a small Virginia town with a lot of history. This was a Sunday night, which wasn't different than usual. My roommates were out of town. I was alone for the evening. It wasn't the first time I'd been alone, but it was certainly rare for one person to be in the house. Oftentimes, friends would crash on couches. There would be more than 4 people who lived there, bounding about. I didn't have anything to drink, watched some TV and turned into bed around midnight. I usually sleep well. I've never suffered any sort of sleep paralysis or even any frightening nightmares. On this night, I couldn't fall asleep. I felt like I was being watched. I got up and confirmed all the doors were locked, lights were off, and laid back down. As soon as I got back into bed, I saw it, frozen fear. What I saw was difficult to describe, but impossible to forget. It was a black shadow, a silhouette of a person. That was it. I could tell it was much darker and left an outline to the wall behind it. And when I saw it, chills went up my spine. I couldn't see many features, but could instantly tell that it was looking at me. I'm laying on my back, just frozen in fear. I could physically move, but I was so scared that I just laid as still as possible. Was I just freaking myself out? I don't think I was. The firehouse was down the road, and ambulance and fire trucks frequently drove on the street outside of the window of the room I lived in, on the first floor. I heard the sirens, and remained still. Red flashing lights, as the truck drove by, quickly illuminated the room. The line of the shadow was 100% there. There was no doubt in my mind, some sort of dark shadow was in the room, at the foot of my bed, looking at me, though I couldn't see any eyes. I had no doubt it wasn't a living human being. Then it started moving. Not really walking, just sliding slowly but steadily. When I first saw it, it was to my right, just beyond my foot. It was moving to my left. It got to the end of my bed and turned to me, seeming to rotate so its dark head was ever focused and locked on me. Just typing this now gives me chills and goosebumps all these years later. Once it turned, it slowly made its way down the bed, closer to me. I was frozen with fear, praying that it would go away. I considered screaming. I considered running out of the room. I thought about rolling over and pulling the sheets over my head, and just pretending that I was somehow tricking myself into imagining. But I just couldn't, because I knew I wasn't tricking myself. Finally, as it almost got up to me, it seemingly started leaning down, right into my face. A black silhouette, very distinct. I just squeezed my eyes tight and refused to open them. I stayed that way, petrified and awake, with my eyes closed for a felt like hours. I then slowly opened them. I couldn't tell if the figure was still close to me or not. I was so freaked out, I didn't know what was going on. Finally, at first light, I got up and ran out of the house, stopping only to get a shirt and sandals and basically sprinting out. I didn't come back until later when a couple of roommates were back. I repeated to them basically everything I said above, and they thought I was either crazy or tricking myself. Since it was August and summer was almost over, I slept on a couch in the living room for the short time left. I already had plans to move out for the school year to a different apartment, and was so scared that I didn't want to stay in that room ever again. Life sort of settled down after that. Business went on as usual, until the following Saturday afternoon, that is, 6 days after my experience. A group of my friends were relaxing, watching TV when 4 or 5 members of a family, all wearing matching reunion t-shirts, knocked on the door. This house had been in their family a long time ago, and they wondered if we would let them in so that they could walk through it and reminisce. Weird, but sure, they were older and seemed nice, so we let them in. We pretty much just went back to watching TV while they wandered around the house. My room was attached to the living room. Once they walked through the kitchen, one of the older ladies pointed into my room and somewhat said, "Oh, I remember that room. It was cousin so-and-so's room. But her daddy, my Uncle Clarence, would never go in there because he saw a ghost. And he was so shook up that he never messed around in there again." I was absolutely floored. This woman volunteered the information. I didn't even think to ask them if they knew about any sort of weird happenings. At this point, even my buddies were stunned to hear this, and now I was happy I told them about it when I did. I asked if the uncle was prone to making up crazy stories, and she said no. By all accounts, he was a fairly typical family member, not any type of person to come up with weird stories for attention or anything. So before I tell you this story, I'm a tall 5'10" college-age girl who lives and has a very take-no-shit attitude. I am not a small girl, and I definitely don't consider myself physically weak. Yet, this experience still shook me to my bones. This is long, but creepy. So my good friend Jack told me that he met a guy who he thought I'd really get along well with. Jack said he knew this guy Alex decently well from his lifting meets, but that from what he could tell, Alex was a cool guy and super nice. Jack is a good friend of mine, and I've always trusted his judgment. Jack said he had met Alex multiple times, and that Alex had always been super nice and really seemed like a good guy. So, Jack kind of set Alex and I up. Keep in mind throughout this then, Alex is a 6'3" and 300-pound powerlifter. Alex and I started talking. Simple stuff at first, but it seemed really easy with him. He texted me first most of the time, and held good conversations. He was a good-looking guy, with similar interests of mine. We also seemed to get along well. He gave me some pet names about a week and a half in, like Baby, but I didn't really mind or think anything of it, as guys tended to do that stuff, and he and I had been pretty flirty with each other. He was very kind and polite with me over the phone, texting and Snapchatting. We got really comfortable with each other, and told each other some really deep and personal things. We'd talk on the phone for multiple hours each night. Things seemed to be going well. After almost 3 weeks of texting and Snapchatting and talking on the phone, Alex and I decided that we should hang out. Now, Alex is a little over 2 hours away, but I agreed to drive and see him if he paid for the gas money. Because he was so far away and we seemed to get along swimmingly, I agreed to spend Saturday and Sunday with him, spending the night at his house. Because I'm a grown woman, I figured spending the night wouldn't be such a big deal. Saturday comes around and I make the drive to meet him. I adore the drive, simply because I love to cruise and listen to music, and the countryside was beautiful. I arrive in his town and find his apartment and park behind his car. I go up and knock on his door. He opens it and envelops me in a big bear hug and squeezed me really hard to me, my back cracked. I found this odd, but I didn't think too much about it until later on. He sat on his couch and started talking for a bit. Within 5 minutes of me being there, he has his tongue down my throat. We had flirted quite a bit over text. So again, I didn't think too much about it. He tried to undress me, but I pushed his hand off of me and told him not yet. I wanted to actually get to know him a bit before that, but he totally insisted. About 20 minutes. I gave in, although I wasn't totally comfortable with it. He messed around. It wasn't enjoyable, because I was uncomfortable the entire time. It gave me really weird vibes. When I thought about it, my stomach hurt. I finished up and he held me as we watched some Netflix. He kept kissing my forehead where my hairline was, and I realized that he was tasting my sweat. This made my stomach churn. I rolled over so my back was facing him so that he couldn't do it anymore. He soon fell asleep and started snoring. I tried to calm myself and sleep for a while to try not to think about it, hoping that when I woke up, I'd feel better. I mean, he and I had been getting along so well over the phone, right? I was sure I was just being silly. However, when I woke up, I felt worse. My stomach hurt and my skin was crawling, and I just knew that something wasn't right. I slipped out of my bed and went out to the living room to find my phone and my clothes. I got dressed and sat on the couch and texted a group chat with two of my really good friends. We tell each other just about everything when it comes to boys. They had both known that I was going to meet him that weekend. I texted them at 6:46 p.m, telling them that he was asleep and that I wasn't totally comfortable. I told them that I really didn't want to piss him off. I didn't trust him. He scared me a little, and that I'd stay there that night, but I wasn't going to spend tomorrow there, and that I'd be home in the morning. They told me to leave now while he was still asleep, but also agreed that I might be overreacting a bit. I jokingly told them that I wouldn't leave until I got my gas money. They agreed, joking back with me. They talked to me for a bit while we slept, acknowledging my worries and telling me to keep them informed. Also joking around, lifting my spirits a bit. I started to feel like maybe I was just worrying myself for no reason. At 7:49 p.m, I texted him that he had woken up because I could hear him getting dressed in the other room. I turned my phone on vibrate so he wouldn't get curious to who I had been talking to. He came in and kissed me on the forehead and sat down on the couch next to me. We talked normally for a bit. He made a really shitty comment about how much he hated cops and how he would probably shoot one if he got the chance. I cocked my head as I listened and furrowed my brow, asking, "You realize my dad is a cop, right?" He looked me dead in the eye and said, "Yeah, I remember you telling me." But he gave a chuckle and followed up with, "But of course not him." My stomach dropped again, but his eyes held mine for a little too long. I didn't waver. I'm a pretty defiant girl. I didn't say anything. I wasn't going to back down either, and soon he looked away. Quickly after that, he asked me if I was hungry. I told him I was, and he called an order of pizza for carrier, as we had planned a pizza and movie night that night. He kept calling me his baby, but he would barely hold any eye contact with me, other than that awkward time after I mentioned my father. I quickly texted the group chat as he got his shoes on and such, letting them know that I was still really uncomfortable, and mentioning that he refused to hold any eye contact with me at all, other than in really long and uncomfortable bursts. I joked with them that I would stay there for the pizza since I'm a chubby girl. While we waited for the pizza to be made, we had about 15 minutes before we had to go pick it up. We laid on the couch, with him sitting between my legs, my back to the armrest. He played with my feet, splaying out my toes to where it hurt and also digging his nails into the underside of my toes. I would flinch, but he seemed to like my flinching away. So soon, I just gripped my teeth and let it happen. He asked me what size my feet were, and I told him, and he seemed pleased with the answer. I am a pretty tall girl, 5'10", and so I have pretty large feet. But he also made a comment about how he wanted to keep them for himself, which made my skin crawl. I am a very defiant and generally decently sassy girl, but I don't enjoy confrontation, and this man scared me, so I felt frozen. I texted my friends that he was playing with my feet, and jokingly sent them, "Is the pizza even worth it?" My friends have decent senses of humor, and the girl replied, "If it ain't Pizza Hut, it's not." Talking to them gave me a bit of security and relief, and I kept telling myself that I was probably overthinking some stuff. My guy friend from the group chat was worried about me and telling me to get out of there. I wanted to, but at this point, I felt like I was in too deep. I was honestly scared he was going to hurt me or try to stop me if I tried to leave. I decided I would eat the pizza with him and see if it got any better. We got into his car and went to get the pizza. And on the way there, I mentioned that I really liked this little town he lived in, as it was similar to where I go to college. And as we passed a building, he mentioned that he used to be a yell leader there. This was the first normal intro to conversation he had said all night, so I asked him how he liked doing that. His answer was, "I liked the guys, but I fucking hated the girls. Dumb bitches didn't know shit. I actually threatened one of the girls once that I was going to give her a Colombian necktie, and my coach told me that I should go through with it." I, being a dumbass and somewhat sheltered girl, asked what a Colombian necktie was. My stomach flopped as he explained it. "I highly doubt your coach would tell you to go through with that," I said in a dry tone, testifying at his story. He just told me whatever and drove on. He then proceeded to dig his thumb into my leg. I pushed his hand off of my leg and told him that him digging his thumb into my leg like that hurt. And he just looked over at me, gave me a huge smile, and said that he was testing me. Thankfully, we got to the pizza place quickly, and he got out to get the pizza. I told him I would stay in the car, but really, it was just so that I could text my friends. I told them what had happened, and I considered bailing out of the car right then. But as the thought crossed my mind, he was already coming back out of the store with the pizza and getting in the car. I put my phone under my right leg and looked straight ahead as we drove away from the pizza place, instantly regretting not getting out of the car while he was away. As we drove, he asked me about my parents. A relatively normal question, so I thought. I told him that I was really close to my mother, but had been closer to my dad when I was younger. I mentioned that I had talked to my dad on the phone on the drive up. He grabbed my leg again and asked with a gut-wrenching inflection in his voice, "Yeah, I bet you're a daddy's girl. You sure look like it. Do you love your daddy?" And although I wanted to scream, I turned to him, looked him dead in the eye with a bland expression on my face, and said, "Yep." Apparently, that wasn't the reaction he was expecting, because after that, he shut up and didn't say anything until we got into the house. I walked up to his door carrying the pizza, but I felt like I was in a dream. My legs were walking forward, but I was screaming at them to run the other way. However, I couldn't, because I knew my keys were still sitting on the arm of his couch. I decided to play the role and get out when I could. I ate pizza. I watched him put my pizza on my plate, actually worried that he was going to try and drug me. I ate slowly, trying to prolong the time I could spend out of his arms, because the entire night, other than when he was sleeping, he had been touching me one way or another. I had already excused myself for the bathroom once, and I knew I couldn't go again without raising suspicion, so I was stone-faced, trying to keep my panic at bay. He turned on a movie as we ate. I actually got into it. It definitely wasn't something I would usually watch. I think I just needed a distraction. During the movie, I started crying and hyperventilating because she had watched someone get shot. He laughed and shook his head. I looked at him a little warily, but didn't say anything. You know, I dated a girl who would have panic attacks. He said panic attacks in the most mocking tone I had ever heard before. She'd have them at night. I knew she was faking that shit. So I would cover her face with a pillow and lay on her until she shut up. She'd fight it for a while, but after a little while, she'd stop. He said it so casually. My heart flared for that girl. That's fucked up, I told him, blandly. Why? He asked. Why would you treat her like that? I asked, obviously a little heated. He laughed, obviously enjoying how upset I was getting. Because I couldn't fucking sleep. So go sleep on the couch, I said, my tone getting flat, obviously over this shit. He gave me a deadly look and said, I don't sleep on the couch. I shrugged and laughed mockingly at his macho man routine, trying to seem indifferent, although I was actually scared shitless, and said, whatever. I turned back to the TV, but I could feel his eyes on me, glaring a hole into my face. I didn't waver and focused on what the actors were saying. Soon, I felt him shift, so he was practically laying on me again. We watched for just a few minutes, and my mind raced. I am an overthinker, so thoughts of what he'd do to me if I stayed there flickered through my mind. I then realized that I didn't know where my phone was. I looked around as best as I could, and I saw it on the floor. I reached down and scooted it closer towards me, before he grabbed my other hand and started sucking on my fingers. My toes curled in disgust, and I wanted to vomit when I thought about the fact that he had actually touched my bare flesh earlier. I grabbed my phone with my free hand as he was distracted and set it on my chest. I took my hand away from him and he let it go. After a few more minutes, he grabbed it again and I took it away before he could kiss it again. "What the fuck, babe?" he asked. I wanted to scream that I wasn't his babe, but I said in a matter-of-fact tone, "I'm not in the mood and I want to watch the movie." He muttered under his breath, just barely audible enough for me to hear over the TV, "Bitch, shut the fuck up." My stomach shriveled up at his words, and my skin felt like it was on fire. The feeling of rage and fear made me feel sick. "Excuse me?" I asked. He looked at me, surprised that I had heard him, and we held eye contact for way too long. His eyes were unwavering and deadly, and he was waiting for a reaction. I decided I wouldn't give him one, so I looked back at the TV, but my skin pricked into goosebumps to the point that they actually hurt. Once he also looked away, I texted the group chat. I directed my text to the girl. I said, "I need you to call me in tears saying that your mum is in hospital. Make it believable. He's right next to me. I need to get out of here, please." She agreed, and a few minutes later, she called me. I answered, and she put on a show about how her mum wasn't doing well, and that she needed me to be there. I agreed, and kept the phone to my ear as I quickly got up and put my shoes on, while also getting my jacket and keys. He stood as well, and was obviously unhappy, towering over me as I tried to get my stuff together. I hung up the phone after putting on a pretty decent show, and looked to him. I explained to him that I needed to go, but I would text him. Before he could protest, I was at the door, where I had failed to realize that there were 3 different locks that he had locked. I fumbled with them, my hands shaking. He kept his deadly gaze on me, and asked, "You'll come back in the morning, right?" To make it believable, I turned and gave him a kiss. "Of course, I just gotta deal with this. Look, I'm sorry," I said. He perked up at this and agreed, unlocking the 3rd lock for me. I shut the door behind me and practically sprinted to my car. I pulled away quickly, and as I got to the stoplight a few blocks away, I broke down and sobbed. A rush of relief came over me, as well as the realization that I had trusted this man, who was completely different than who he seemed to be. I felt so stupid. I called my friend, the girl, and let her know that I was safe and that I was driving over the next 2 hours home. By now, it was well after 10:30 at night. I texted the group chat to let my guy friend know as well. My foot was heavy on the gas as I drove. I checked the rearview mirror multiple times, hoping that he wasn't following me. Tears of relief and regret streamed down my face for almost half the drive home, but stopped as I finally hit the interstate. I felt safe and free from him as I took the on-ramp towards my home. My skin has been crawling since I got home, and I haven't been able to get the things that he said out of my head. Moral of the story, don't trust people you've only spoken with over the phone. Not everything is as it seems. When I was 19, I moved to a different city with a boy I was dating, but we still had different housing. My dad has PTSD from Afghanistan and always taught me to lock my doors during all times of the day, and gave me a shotgun to protect myself in the city since I was living alone. I I don't remember when it started, but I would get nervous about small sounds in the house. For a while, I dismissed it as paranoia about living alone. But then, one night, I knew I could feel someone in the apartment. My boyfriend was spending the night and was a large football player with a black belt, so I wasn't too worried for him to look around. He checked all the closets and rooms and the locks, and there was nobody. Sometime later, we came back to my apartment after being out for the day. I always check to make sure it's still locked before I put the key inside. It was locked and we walked in. The instant I walked in, I just knew that there was someone inside. I could feel them. My boyfriend checked everything again and again, and there wasn't anyone there though. So time passed and we broke up, and I started dating another person. I got my bipolar diagnosis and was in a crisis. My now ex and friends were over, and he made a scene about my new boyfriend. I threw everyone out and binge drank and blacked out. I came to, trash talking myself in a mirror, but then there were figures all around me watching. More time passed, and at this point it wasn't unusual for me to see the figures in my doorway, and it only happened when I was alone. Sometimes they were only in the doorway reflection of my mirror, not in the real doorway. Last spring I was in Virginia, mining village, with my family to bury my grandmother at a family cemetery. One of the nights at the hotel, I woke my entire family with screaming. In my dream, I was in my childhood home, and there was a Slenderman-esque shadow person there. He opened his mouth, and it got huge, and TV static came out of it so loudly it hurt. I had anxiety over this for months. For a long time, I only saw them by myself in my room, or if I was driving at night. My doctor said that the driving ones are normal for people to see, and dismissed them. I slept with the lights on, a lot. But then I started seeing them when I'd visit my mum or when my boyfriend was spending the night. I've pointed them out to my boyfriend, but he doesn't see them. This fall, I started getting sleep paralysis too. The first time, I thought I heard my boyfriend shuffling around at the edge of the bed, but when I tried to look up, I couldn't. And it was a shadow person. He walked up to me and reached down and held his hand over my eyes. I tried to scream, but couldn't. The second time, I woke up to hands clasping my shoulders. One of them grabbed my neck and started choking me. I couldn't breathe. I tried to make noise by blowing out air and woke my boyfriend. He grabbed my hand and the grip around my neck tightened. My boyfriend shook me out of it. These figures are nearly always men with no facial features. Sometimes there is one, and sometimes there are many. They are menacing. Once I woke up to the force of a woman throwing herself angrily on top of me, and I hid under the covers. Sometimes they feel more real than others, so I can ignore them or jump up screaming. I get nightmares of them chasing me around the apartment, and recently, my mum told me that my dad had a nightmare of shadow people chasing him, and it really scared him. The meds the doctors are giving me don't seem to stop them, and my doctors don't know why, but lately, they've started waving at me from my doorway. Just to preface everything, I'm a 26-year-old male who currently lives in Richmond, VA. I would never have expected this to happen to me, but hey, here I am. It's a bit of a long one, so bear with me. My friends and I decided to go to a little brewery in a nice part of town, sipping beers and playing Cards Against Humanity, nothing crazy. I went up to the bar to order another beer, and my friend walking past me jokingly shoulder bumped me, and I gave him a nudge back. Here's where things started to get weird. King Jellybean, male, late 30s, tall and average looking, except for his dead eyes, saw this and approached.
Why did he just do that?
Oh, that? He's just my friend, just messing around.
Oh, are you gonna do anything about it?
Clearly fucking joking, I say. Oh, don't worry, I'm gonna kill him later.
Can you tell it to me in a poem?
Yeah, seriously, it went down like this. I don't remember what I said, but I actually word vomited something out after realizing that he was dead serious.
Ah, I can respect that.
He then extends his hand for a handshake. I could already tell that the guy was fucking Looney Tunes. But I was like, meh, fuck it. So I shook his hand. Let me tell you, this guy had an iron grip. Like, scary strong. And he held onto my hand for a little too long. So I wriggled my hand free and decided that maybe I should get his name, just as a precaution in case anything goes down. So friend, what's your name? He then mumbles, inaudibly and incoherently. I tried again, but nothing. So I just smiled and walked back to my table. The hairs on the back of my neck were a little tingly, but I figured I was just being paranoid. Once I got back to my table, I saw out of my peripherals that he was still watching me. I decided to tell my friends about this little encounter, but they brushed it off as nothing. So again, I went with, meh, fuck it. A little while later, there was a break in our main game, so a couple of us decided to drain the main vein. My friend and I were walking past the bar to the bathroom in the back, and sure enough, King Jellybean stepped directly in front of me and insisted that I shake his hand again. So, like an idiot, I did. I tried to make small talk during this creepy handshake, but again, the dude just mumbled some things. By this point, my friend had already pissed and was now exiting the bathroom. As he walked by, he heard me say something along the lines of, alright, you're hurting my hand now. I've got to pee, so I'm gonna go. He started to walk back to the bathroom as soon as I got my hand free. So instead, I just walked back to my table because I didn't want to go near him. My friends were now aware of him and were equally creeped out. 10 minutes go by and I really had to pee now, seeing as I've been holding it. I told my friends this and one of them jokingly said to, "Watch out, he might be waiting in the bathroom for you." A little light clicked on in my brain and we looked around the room. He wasn't there. We were sitting by the exit, definitely didn't see him go, so now I'm really freaked out. I asked one of them to come to the bathroom with me, so I walked to the closer one. The light was off with the door slightly ajar. I nudged it open a few feet and didn't see anything inside, just darkness with a vague silhouette of the bathroom fixtures. But still, something just felt off. I turned to my friend. Dude, I don't know, it just feels off. My friend started saying something. I don't know what he said because, out of my peripheral vision, my nightmare happens. The door opens, and he's fucking standing there in the dark doorway, alone, staring at me with the creepiest smile I've ever fucking seen. Just to paint a mental picture, the guy was standing alone in a bathroom with the fucking lights off, just waiting for me to walk in for over 10 minutes. According to my friends who were watching this from across the room, my reaction was just to yell, "Oh hell no," and I proceeded to make a beeline back to the table while just shouting, "Nope, nope." I wish I could say that we confronted him or called the cops, but I was honestly too freaked out. We just grabbed our coats and got the fuck out of there. Who knows what the hell would have happened if I'd gone in, or if another person did. Luckily, I don't have that answer. My patient died on the wing I work on. She was terminal, but not expected to go immediately. She was going to a new facility after a fairly long battle with cancer. She was scheduled to go early the next morning, and the husband had plans on meeting her there. Everything was set up. She was in good spirits. Her assessment was fine. She took her medications and said that she was going to watch the news, then take a nap. An hour later, I go to check on her. I'm quietly checking her IV, making sure her stuff is in reach, move her table, and then notice that she was gone. She was sitting up, holding onto the side rail. She honestly looked like she was sleeping, but there was no heartbeat, no respiration. Most of the time when people expire, their mouths drop open. It's really obvious. With her, no. I had to even call a co-worker to confirm. I was expecting a wake-up, but she was gone. I attempted to contact her husband, who I couldn't reach, and started the paperwork, in addition to attending my other patients. A few minutes later, I'm by the central desk and someone asks, "Where were you?" And I told them I was giving medication down the hall. I see two of the other nurses exchange looks, but nurses are weird, and since they didn't elaborate, I continue on my nightly duties. I'm at the very end of the hall doing some patient education, and the charge nurse comes and gets me. I assume that the husband is calling back, but that wasn't the case. Apparently, as I've been caring for my other patients at the opposite end of the ward, there have been some phone calls coming out of the deceased patient's room to the central station. There were several of them, no answer, just breathing. I mean, this has to be a prank, right? But the phone rings, and I look and see the patient's room number on the caller ID. I walk in the room. The phone is neatly on the bedside table. The TV is off, and the deceased patient looks like she's napping. I check the bathroom. It's empty. I'm going to leave the door open, halfway, I say as I leave the room. There were no more phone calls after that. But for the next hour, alarms go off in the empty rooms. Call lights come on for patients that can't move. An important piece of equipment died, and the dementia patient keeps complaining about the other patient that keeps coming into her room, loosely fitting the description of the deceased. The husband finally comes to the unit because he knew why I was calling. He spends a few minutes with her. When he comes out of the room, he finds me and says, "She told me this morning that she didn't ever want to go to a nursing home." Well, I guess she meant it. And after that, everything returned to normal. Well, normal as far as hospitals go, anyway. First of all, I'm a young woman, barely big enough to walk my dog. If this had escalated at all, I have no idea what would have happened. I'm not easily frightened, but this scared the shit out of me. It actually happened last night, and I have no idea if it'll happen again. I figured it was bizarre enough to post here. It's just me and my giant dog in a nice private apartment attached to some townhouses separated from the other buildings by a strip of woods. It's kind of like a tiny house that just shares a wall with the apartment building. As nice as it is, it's in a not so nice part of town. But I have a backyard, my own space, and working electricity for cheap. So I love this place. It's my first time living out on my own, and I'm not gonna lie, I've been a little freaked out about living alone, even with a big dog for security. Last night definitely didn't help. So I was laying in bed browsing Reddit and trying to fall asleep when I heard tapping on the window. My bedroom has two windows facing the backyard on ground level, about 3 meters from the tree line with nothing but open grass outside. At first, since I'm not used to sleeping on the first floor, I thought it was a tree or something blowing up against the outside of the house. When I remembered that I'm on the first and only floor with no trees close enough to reach the house, I started to feel a little bit nervous. I was some weird mix of both scared and annoyed that the tapping was keeping me awake. The noise had my dog's attention, but he wasn't barking yet, which meant that it probably wasn't a person, so I wasn't as afraid as I could have been. Gradually, annoyance replaced the fear, and I decided I should tell whatever it was to knock it off. It had been nearly 30 minutes of this weird, uneven tapping. It was almost midnight, and I had an early start in the morning. Best case scenario, there was no one outside and I was talking to myself with no one there to hear me. Worst case, there was someone outside. My nonchalance would catch them off guard, and they would leave, right? Yeah, absolutely. I figured if there was someone there, they'd expect fear, not confrontation. I worked up some courage and called, "Fuck off," into the dark. The tapping continued though. A couple of seconds later, I repeated a little louder, "Fuck off, I'm trying to sleep." The tapping stopped. After a second, I heard a male voice call back,
"Sorry."
The tapping didn't start again, but holy fuck. I didn't expect someone to actually be there. I got out of bed and ran to the window with my phone in hand, ready to call the police. But when I peeked through the blinds, I saw the guy with his hands up and the weirdest smile on his face. I quickly turned my phone flashlight on and put it in front of my face so that he couldn't see what I looked like. A few seconds later, I turned the light off, and he hadn't moved an inch, not even his face. He still had that weird, creepy smile and stared at the window with his hands up, like he was posing for a photo or something. In hindsight, I don't know why I didn't take one. Finally, he turned around and started walking back through the woods, and into what I assume was his own apartment right across from mine. What a way to meet the neighbors. I have no idea what possessed him to tap on my window for half an hour or what he had in mind, but he hasn't come back yet. I'm not sure what I'll do if he does. I didn't fall asleep last night, and I'm nervous to go to bed tonight, but I have class in the morning. Besides, I have a big scary dog for exactly this reason. I should be fine, but still, what kind of person just knocks on some stranger's window at midnight? When I woke up this morning, I saw that the window pane on the outside had a few deep scrapes. I'm not sure if the guy made them, but I'm reporting it to the management and maybe the police tomorrow. I don't want to know why this guy wanted into my bedroom if he did. I hope he just wanted to rob me. My house has 3 stories, including the basement. All the doors are upstairs, and my old room just happened to be right below the door to the attic. I always found it incredibly hard to sleep in that room, as it was always either freezing in winter or nearly 100 degrees in summer. None of the other rooms had this, but I always assumed that it was just faulty heating or something. Anyway, around 3 years ago, I started hallucinating at night. There were things like my blanket turning into a giant snake and falling off of my bed, or ants everywhere that would disappear when I turned my light on. So at night, I don't take anything I see seriously, as it's usually just my overactive imagination. It started when I first moved into the house. I slept in a different room, but of course, still had trouble sleeping. Every night, at the exact same time when everyone was asleep but me, something would knock on the roof 4 times. It was always 4 times. It sounded like a hammer kind of. Nothing too ominous. It continued for about a week before it stopped. I never told anyone because I knew they wouldn't believe it. I knew I couldn't tell whether it was real or not. Other small stuff happened. Sometimes when I was upstairs alone, the door would open or close on its own, but I always wrote it off as the wind. The thing that freaked me out though was that my dog, who stays in my room most of the time, started to bark every time it happened. After the 3rd time, it was obviously not a coincidence. From then on, I tried to avoid going upstairs alone. It was just unsettling. Then it got worse. I was home alone one day. This time, it was broad daylight. I was watching TV. My dog was with me downstairs. That's when I heard scraping from upstairs, as well as a clicking. It sounded like dog nails hitting wood. I, of course, freaked out and tried to ignore it. The noise continued, but it now sounded like whatever was upstairs was opening and closing doors, as well as flicking lights on and off. I just turned the TV up, trying to pretend that it wasn't happening, but it got worse. The worst part about it was I knew that this was real, because I don't see things during the daytime. Plus, my dog actually went upstairs to whoever was making a noise, which freaked me the fuck out because whatever that was something she was used to and comfortable with. The noises eventually stopped, but I put off going upstairs for as long as I could. That night it was really late and dark in my room, and as always, I couldn't sleep. I stared at my ceiling when I noticed a black square. The door to my attic was halfway open, but no one had gone in and out of there for years. We didn't even keep anything up there other than insulation. I got the fuck out of my room after that. I ended up sleeping on the couch, and the next day I asked my family if anyone had gone into the attic. Of course, no one had. I still don't know what's in my house, but I've since traded my room with my brother. One one of the rare times I went back into that room and sat on his bed while he was in the bathroom because his room has the Wi-Fi router in it. I swear that I heard loud breathing coming from under the bed. I was definitely wide awake. Okay, some context. I'm a 24-year-old guy. This happened to me about 6 months ago. I live in a rather large apartment complex, one that is very open and social. People are always outside, waving to each other, having drinks and barbecues, stuff like that. It's quite a safe place, with people looking out for each other all the time, and if anything happens, everyone is usually in the know. Anyway, I live at the higher part of my building, very close to the roof. In fact, there's a door near my place next to some stairs leading up to it, so it isn't that hard to get up there. I've personally only been up there once before, and after this, I don't plan on going up there alone. It was about 8 o'clock at night, and I was on my computer checking my email, as well as just relaxing and browsing different sites. Well, at that moment, my internet decides to up and shit itself. Now, this is pretty common, as I use my building's Wi-Fi, and it does this at certain points. This normally would be okay, but I was reading about 3 important emails, and couldn't check the other 2 at the time because I hadn't opened any other tabs. So, I decided to head outside, around to another building at a friend's house, who I know. They're really nice about letting me use their internet when things like this happen. So, I'm getting up to leave my place, and I get into the hallway, when I hear a thump up above, on the roof. This didn't surprise me that much though. I thought it was probably someone up there drinking or hanging out. Sometimes it happens. So I get to the bottom of the building, and I'm leaving, and I hear a loud rattle from the roof. I look up and I don't see anything. I brush it off as a random person on the roof who fell or something like that. So I continue walking. A few minutes later, I'm nearing my friend's building and I hear a nearby bush shake. I'm getting a little weirded out at this point, but I dismiss it as a cat or a lizard moving around in the bush and just keep walking. I arrive at my friend's place and sit down on the curb near the entrance. I pull out my phone and unlock it, and go to my email and continue where I left off. A few minutes into reading it, I hear another rattle, like at my building, only now it's here. I'm getting an increasingly bad feeling about this, but I keep telling myself it's nothing. About 5 minutes later, I happen to look up at the roof and get startled for a minute. There's a guy peering down at me, crouching. I figure he's just enjoying the view of the place and just happened to be looking at me for the moment. I shine the light from my phone at him and I can make out more features. He's wearing tattered pants, a black hoodie and a mask. One of those white masks that you buy at a party store. Only on it, there's drawn a really large smile. Now this creeped me the fuck out for a moment. But again, I give myself an excuse to brush it off. I laugh nervously at the guy and just go back to reading. I look up a few minutes later and the guy is sticking his head over even more. I'm starting to get scared now. This is beginning to feel like some sort of horror story. It was just me and this guy out there, and I really didn't know what the fuck he wanted. So I decided to get up and just walk back to my place. I get back with no trouble and start laughing by the time I get there, thinking about how silly I was. The guy was probably some prankster trying to scare me or something. So I'm in a good mood walking to the entrance, and I look up, and immediately feel all my good mood drain away. That same fucking guy is there. Only now, he's on my roof, in that same creepy manner, staring down at me. I figure he must have run over when I left and gotten on top of the roof before I got there. So I'm just standing there, frozen for a moment, and this guy tilts his head, as if he's wondering what's wrong. I quickly head inside and just try to forget it, going to my place and locking my door. My internet is working now anyway. So, later that night, I decided to go to sleep, and I lay in my bed for a while. Finally, I start getting sleepy and shut my eyes. A little while later, I hear tapping on my window near my balcony, so I get up to investigate the noise. I go to my balcony's glass door, pull back the curtain, and immediately scream. The guy, who I'll call the roof man for obvious reasons, is fucking hanging from the roof and just staring at me upside down. He tilts his head and I'm standing there frozen, wondering where the fuck this psychopath came from. What he does next frightens me even more. He climbs down onto my balcony and knocks on my glass door like he wants in. When I don't comply, he starts banging lightly. This process escalates until he rams into the glass full force, cracking it. By this time, I'm scrambling up and unlocking my door to get the fuck out of there. I open the door and go out quickly as I hear glass shatter. I shut the door and run down the hall and bang on the neighbor's door. I hear my neighbor come to answer and look back at my place down the hall and see my door open and the roof man peeks out. At this moment, my neighbor answers and looks at me, worried. I point down the hall and he looks. The roof man is standing there, just staring us down. He suddenly breaks into a sprint, running at us like crazy. My neighbor pulls me into his place quickly and closes the door. A couple of seconds after, we feel a loud banging at the door, much louder than my banging earlier. We look at the people and see that he's relentlessly ramming the door. The door holds up though, and after a while, he gives up and runs off. We called the cops and they searched the complex for him, but he wasn't there. I don't know what scares me more, that horrific night or knowing that he's still out there, and he could do that again to me, or potentially someone else. My neighbor kindly allowed me to stay at his place for a while, saying that he understood and that if something like that happened again, he'd have my back. Honestly, I can't thank him enough. So, now, here I sit, still in my neighbor's place, relaxing and watching TV, and I haven't seen the psychopath since that night 6 months ago. Thank God. First of all, I want to say that I don't believe in paranormal nonsense. But this, what happened to me and my friends, I can't explain. I live in Lithuania. It's a small country between Russia and the Baltic Sea. It's kind of a second world country, and we're struggling to keep up with other European Union countries. And also, we have a lot of resemblances to our neighbour, Russia. As for me, I'm not one to be scared lightly, because my father always pushed me to do something to improve myself and my body. So I've been doing boxing from the age of 6. We have just finished school and me and my friend Vaska, we started doing some small business with the help of his father. After our hard days of work, we would do a daily drive around the city, picking up girls and drinking beer at a local bar. But we got tired of that routine soon and started searching for calmer places to chill. So we asked around some friends, and they said there's a place in the suburbs where they go to smoke weed. There's no action, no cops, and no one around for almost 24/7. But there is a spooky-ass barn there, which is abandoned. We didn't give a damn about the barn, and after our hard-working day had ended, we searched the coordinates of the abandoned place and got there at about 7 PM. The first impression we had was that the place was shit. There was a small parking lot. The old barn looked like it was abandoned for ages, and all of the area was surrounded by scarce trees. There was nobody around though, so we liked the seclusion. We started going there once or twice a week to talk about shit we had to deal with, or just chill. But after about a month of going there, weird things started to happen. It was a Friday, and we brought some beer and drove to the barn. It was springtime, around 8 PM and the sun was setting, so it was getting pretty dark quickly. We were talking casually when we heard something crisping in the back seat of the car. The sound was metallic. It sounded like a small spring from a pen being twisted or something. We looked at each other with confusing looks and started talking again. But the sound was getting more loud until it really started creeping us out. We got out of the car to look what was going on. Just as we got out, the sound stopped. I suggested that it was simply the car seat strings. The idea calmed us, and the evening went normal from then on. After about 3 or 4 days, we made the same trip to the barn. This time, we were too tired and we had nothing to talk about, so we took my laptop and watched a movie. But the sound came back, and this time it was louder than before, and it really spooked Vaska. "What the fuck is that noise?" he asked. "I don't know, but stay in your seat. I'll check the trunk," I said to him. After I opened the trunk, the sound stopped instantly. It was confusing. Seat springs couldn't emit that loud metallic sound. It was impossible, and the car engine was turned off for about 20 minutes back then, so it couldn't be that either. I just got back in the driver's seat and said, well, that was some fucking weird shit. Instantly, after I said that, my cell phone in my pocket started to ring. When I looked at it, there was no caller ID, and the cell phone was ringing in my hand, but the phone screen was black. It stopped just after I unlocked the screen, and then it hit me. It wasn't even my ringtone. My friend and I shared the same confused look, and figured that we should go home now. After I got back home, I started messaging these experiences to another of my close friends, David. He of course laughed and said that I was talking shit. I knew that he would think I was trying to fool him, so I offered him to come with us another time when we drive there. But that would be the last fucking time I went there. Almost 2 weeks have passed after our last visit to the barn place, and as I had promised, I took David there too. It was around 9 PM when we got there. I was driving, Vasca was sitting in the front seat, and David sat in the middle of the back seat. We were talking about girls, just sitting in the car laughing and making fun of each other, when that damn metallic spring sound started going on again. I told them to quieten down, and we listened to the sound for a while. It wasn't as loud as before. Then David said, "You guys are kidding, right? This is the worst attempt to trick someone I've ever seen." We told him straight up that we weren't doing this. My phone rang once more. The phone screen was black like before, and after I unlocked it, it stopped. David did see that the screen was black, but said that I probably have some app installed to trick him. After a few seconds, Vasquez's phone started to ring too, and it was the same ringtone as mine. That really spooked me, and I felt adrenaline rushing to my head, and I saw David getting confused, and he said, "Okay, this is really weird. I think we should get out of here, guys." "What? You're not being a scared little bitch, are you?" I mocked him, but inside, I was getting a little bit scared too. And then, the most frightening fucking shit in my life happened. There was a sound from my phone, and it said, "You don't belong here." It was my fucking phone speaking. The voice was like an echo, but it wasn't any of our voices. What the fuck? The hair on my body stood straight up, and I felt like it was about 20 degrees colder than a second ago. I saw that Vasquez's breath was now visible, and David turned pale. There was no way that we made that shit up. It freaked us so fucking hard that we panicked like hell. I tried to start the engine, but there was no reaction to the key, and that got me panicking even more, and my friend started shouting, "What the fuck, dude? Go! Go!" And as I finally started the car, the headlights turned on as well, and what we saw that moment, I still can't explain. It was so terrifying that I couldn't feel my legs or my hands. We saw 3 fucking shadows from below the car, standing directly in front of us. I immediately turned the lights off and stepped on it. My heart was pounding so hard that I could hear it. It was really hard to drive without lights on, so I turned them on again. Thankfully, those fuckers were gone. David tried to calm Vasca down, as he was shook up more than us. I asked them both, did they see what I saw? They confirmed that they saw those shadows. We were speeding, but honestly, I didn't care, because there were almost no police in this part of the suburbs, and I just had to get somewhere where I could feel safe again. We chose to go to the local shopping centre, as there were some people and the parking lot was highly lit. We just sat there for almost half an hour and couldn't say a word. After the adrenaline rush came down, we tried to explain logically what the hell happened, but we just couldn't explain it. The phone's ringing and the metallic twisting sound couldn't be explained by radio interference or backseat springs. But the voice and those shadows, there was nothing else in front of us. The car we drove that day, it almost has no engine bay. In other words, we definitely would have seen someone sneaking up towards us. And the cold, how did it get so cold all of a sudden? After that, we never went to that place again, and convinced our friends that there is something bad happening in there, so they wouldn't go in there either. I later found out that the barn belonged to some Christian dean who died in a strange way. The thing is, nobody knows exactly how he died though, and the barn was abandoned ever since he died. I know plenty of you won't believe what I've told you here, but hell, I wouldn't believe this shit either if I hadn't seen it. If someone could explain what the hell those shadows were, I would sure love to know. I'll be sure to read the comments. I work at my local county animal shelter. Done it for a few years, and it's pretty much what I was meant for. The way the block is set up, it's like one winding stretch of county buildings. Basically, there's everything on this block from doctors to the homeless shelter, so this block has some pretty interesting characters. No biggie, I live in a pretty shit area, so crazy stuff happens all the time anyway. Someone jumped out of their car and stabbed someone in a different car in traffic in front of me last year. Didn't even make the news. It even came back looking for me. I just asked. Just go to parties with them. The way the volunteer guy said it made it seem like an order, not a request. The hairs on the back of my neck went up. I get an idea while he's talking, and just pray to the Almighty it fucking works. I force a relaxed smile and agree, saying that I just have to put my binders in my car or my boss will kill me. They look stoked with my agreement and proceed to follow me to my car. I took the opposite direction in which I normally go home, just to make myself feel better, even though I have an hour commute home. As soon as I got home, I deactivated my Facebook. I told my boss the next day over the phone what happened, and they are working on transferring me to one of the other 2 shelters in the county, which is pretty sweet because all of them will still be a shorter commute. But it still sucks to be afraid to go into work. I was about 13. My parents and I moved into an old house. It was at least 90 years old. It was large and it was in pretty good condition for a house that old. I was also an only child, and I got the second biggest room on the 2nd floor. That room was huge. Sometimes my parents left me at home by myself for a few hours. Whether they were going shopping or on a date, I always asked to stay at home. I didn't mind staying at home because I like to think of myself as responsible and trustworthy, and it made me feel special. One night, at around 6 PM or so, my parents had to go run some errands. They were the kind of people who spent long hours out shopping for the best deals, and they used a lot of coupons on whatever they could, and I did not want to be involved with this at all, so I just decided not to come. G'day mates, it's B-Buster here. So before the video, reload to my Discord server and Twitch channel so that you guys can join in with the rest if you would like. Anyway, this happened when I was 4 or 5 years old. I was at a rather large toy store with my dad and sister, who was 2 years older than me, so that I could pick out a birthday present for a friend of mine. My dad and I were looking at the Lego they had available, while my sister was shuffling around, bored out of her mind. At some point, she wandered away. I was looking at the box of a castle set, wishing that it was my birthday coming up, when my sister returned and tugged on my dad's arm and shoulders. He asked the cashier if she had a phone he could use. In 2008, I was attending night school at CALC, Broadview and Danforth in Toronto, Canada. And one day, I was about 40 minutes early for class, so I decided to go smoke a little joint I had on me. I walked down behind the CALC and over the little walking bridge that goes over the DVP on-ramp and found a little area off the main trail that goes out to the Riverdale Park. I lit my little joint and took some tokes when an older Asian man in his late 50s, early 60s walked up to where I was chilling. I figured he was just out on a walk. He had a little grocery bag in his hand, wrapped around something, and he smiled and nodded at me, and I used to be super friendly, so I smiled back. I decided to walk out of there and find somewhere else to smoke before class. As I walked down the trails, he began to follow me. I even started taking trails that made no sense, and I even went in a circle, but he still followed, and now he was fiddling a lot with the bag in his hand. I walked back out to the main trail where there were people, and he still followed me all the way down the trail out to the park. He seemed to lose interest in me and started looking at some flowers and stuff, so I walked a bit further and finished my doobie. At this point, I thought he might be a cop or something, because at the time, I'm an in-shape 18-year-old male, full punk gear, tattoos. I mean, people thought I was scary, and there were women walking alone on the small trails with headphones on. So, why would he want to attack me? Either way, I was feeling uneasy. Once I was done smoking, I began to walk back up the trail towards the school, and he started following me again. As I sped up, he sped up. As I slowed down, he slowed down. I stopped to tie my combat boots tighter in case he was going to attack me, and he even stopped. By now, I'm back at the little walking bridge and see two random joggers stopping to take a break. I walk up to them, pretending that I know them, but low-key explain what's happening. They played along for me, and the guy went off into the wooded area. I decided to walk back over the bridge to class, and the man never stopped staring at me from the forest as I walked over the bridge. I kept looking back as I walked on the cement path that goes along the field behind the school. I was at least a solid 75 to 100 meters away from the walking bridge, and he still wasn't in sight or following me. I figured he had finally fucked off and I was good, so I took one last look back, very far from the bridge now, and didn't see him. I put in my earbuds and started listening to music to calm me down again. Within 30 seconds of listening to my music, it cut out due to a phone call from my girlfriend. When this happened, I suddenly heard footsteps close behind me and spun around, only to see this man who I thought was gone now just 5 feet behind me. I run up the stairs and see my classmate at this time, Warren. I throw off my bag and studded jacket and we get into fight mode just in case we need it. He walks past us, up the path to Danforth, always looking at us. He then walks back down the path towards us, stops and looks at me, and smiles in such a way that I felt sick to my stomach. It was as if he was smiling to let me know that I was lucky that I got away from him. He still had that grocery bag in his hand, and he was still fiddling with something. He took off behind the school and was gone. I reported it to the school in case he went after any other students. I didn't see him when I left school that night, but 2 weeks later, he was in the paper, arrested for masturbating on the subway while holding a woman at knife point. He was wearing the same shirt in his mugshot when he was following me. So the other day I swiped this pretty cool dude on Tinder named Gabe. He adds me on Snapchat. We start talking a little bit. He decides to come pick me up and come smoke for a bit. I'm like, cool, yeah, whatever. But as soon as I get in the car, I get a really weird vibe. I don't know, his smile was just way too wide or something. And he stared at me without blinking, just slightly enough to make me uncomfortable. Also, he wouldn't tell me anything about himself. He just kept saying, "Oh, I just make money doing this and that. You know, whatever I can." And he would refer to all females as bitches. Major red flag. Well, after a couple of blunts, I'm starting to get tired, and I'm like, "So, would you mind driving me home?" And he goes, yeah, sure. I just gotta stop by the grocery store for a few things." And I'm like, okay, sure." So we go to the grocery store by my house because we're still in my neighborhood. By this time it's pretty dark, but there are some lights on in the parking lot. After about 5 minutes of sitting there while he's typing on his phone, I get kind of curious and look at the reflection of the driver's side window to see if I can read his texts. And I could. And it read, "Yeah, I got her," sitting in the Lucky's parking lot. I immediately went numb from head to toe. I decided I had to do something fast because I don't know who he's texting or why he's telling them where we are. I start to notice things like, even though there's people near us, they're still kind of far away, about 25 or 30 feet, and I almost start to panic. He didn't notice anything though, so I asked, "Aren't you gonna go inside?" And he goes, Yeah, just a second. I'm making a list of all the stuff I need." I almost shit my pants. I could obviously see the texting app still open in the reflection on the window. He was lying. I immediately grabbed my bag and bolted out of the car and started running toward the grocery store. He was like, "Hey, what the fuck? Where the hell are you going?" And tried to grab my bag, but I just made a direct beeline for the lighted entrance of the store. I made it into the store and looked out the window to see him driving around the parking lot, talking on the phone, waving his hands around. Seconds after, he peeled out of the parking lot and almost hit another car. I called my mum to have her pick me up. When I got home, he unmatched me from Tinder and blocked me on Snapchat without saying anything. I'm not sure what your plan was, Gabe, but I'm also glad that I never found out. So, a little background. I grew up in a house where weird shit would happen, so I've always been terrified of the paranormal. So in high school, I decided that it would be a great idea to work at the Ohio State Reformatory. I worked there for 5 years, and had some things happen that I can't explain. In its early years, it was a boys' juvenile detention facility for non-violent offenders. Mid-70s to early 80s, it had become a maximum security prison for adult males. Countless murders and suicides happened here. Here are a few stories from when I was working there. My first day working there, I was following along behind a tour working as a pusher. It was a position designed to keep people from wandering off and obeying the signs. We were on the West Cell Block tour. It was around 3:30 or so, and I was standing on the south side of a few cells from the end of the block, while the guide was sharing something with the group when a few guests were asking me something. I don't remember the question, but the answer involved Jason and Grant from TAPS. But just as I said their names, I got hit from behind. My brother used to do this thing where he would walk up behind me and slam his hand down on my back or shoulder forcefully. At the time, I had thought it was him who did this, and was pissed because it was way more force than usual. So I turned around, ready to face him, but there was absolutely no one there. My brother was on another tour. The guest I had been speaking with looked at me all confused. 10 minutes later, the tour was over and my neck and shoulder were killing me. My rightie was ringing by this point, and the whole area felt like it was on fire. The next day, I woke up with a bruise on my neck and shoulder, and scratches on my ear. On another occasion, between tours, myself and a few other people decided to wander into the basement as we were still new and hadn't been in there before. We were on the east side, under admin section, and just looking around. Very quickly, we felt watched, and it got really cold. The longer we stayed there, the more uncomfortable it became. Only one light works in the main room, and there were 5 adjacent rooms in a hallway between the stairs, so it's really dark here. I sat on the steps for a moment. My friend took a picture of me and her grandson. No one else was on those steps. We looked at it pretty quickly, and behind us, you could see very clearly someone standing there. They were transparent, but really detailed. A few moments later, we heard a shuffling sound. Assuming it was a raccoon, we approached where the noise came from, and noped the fuck out of there, because we were met with a set of red eyes in the darkness. They were not reflecting light as a deer or cat's eyes would. They were glowing and had their own light source. Another day, after tours, myself, my brother and 2 friends were wandering the west cell block. We were on the north side, 4th range. As we were walking, we heard someone walking below us and assumed it was K or M, 2 other people I worked with, and had previously seen them walk past and head for the west tower. As we were walking toward the end of the cell block, after the footsteps, we heard what sounded like a cell door slam. It shut below us, and it shook the range, which was odd because the block is brick and mortar, and the tiers are steel. Immediately following the bang of steel on steel, we heard running, a dragging sound, yelling from 4 different people, more loud bangs, and a thud. Then, everything went silent. We were all looking at each other like, what the fuck? While we stood there for a few minutes listening, K&M walked by again on the ground floor, coming back from the tower. It wasn't them that made the noises. They didn't hear them, as they were in a different part of the prison. If anyone wants to hear more stories, I'd be more than happy to share them. I do have a couple that are hard to talk about because of what happened, but I'm willing to share. Let me know, guys. I'm a long-haul trucker. I see and deal with a lot of weird and scary stuff. I was traveling up US 93 in Nevada, heading to Portland, OR for a delivery. It was around 1:30 in the morning, and I needed to stop and log my half-an-hour break. I found a wide spot and pulled off, did my log-ups and made myself a sandwich. While I was eating said sandwich, I noticed a vehicle pulling behind me. I did not get too concerned about it, but kept one eye on it while I ate. I noticed a figure in the headlight of the vehicle approach the back, driver's side of my trailer, stop, and look like he or she was rubbing the back side of my trailer with his or her hand. Suspicious, I got my pistol out of my lockbox back in my sleeper, cocked and locked it, slid it behind my waistband, and proceeded to climb out of my rig. I walked about 10 feet back, kept my hand on the butt of my pistol, and flicked my flashlight on and aimed it at the person. It was a man. Weird-looking fellow in a dirty whitish trench coat, long straggly hair and bald on top. He was rubbing something on the side of my trailer. I hollered at him to stop what he was doing. He looked up at me and smirked. Without turning his gaze off of me, starts walking towards me. I backed my way to my door, keeping my hand on my pistol, but not pulling it out. I didn't feel like my life was in danger at that time. I opened my door and climbed into my rig. And then I shut the door and locked it. The dude walks up to my door, looks up at me, still smirking. I'm just thinking, what the fuck? This dude is off his rockers. I'm also thinking that my half-an-hour break is over. It's time to go. However, while I'm looking down at him and getting ready to turn the key, I feel my truck lock. I jump and look at my driver's side mirror. Nothing. I look over to check my passenger side mirror. And there, on my step, face pressed to my passenger side window, is a freaky, perfect replica of an old witch, smiling, rotten teeth, cocking her head left, then right, fogging up my window. Needless to say, I about sucked my seat up my ass. But that's not the end of it. Oh no. The dude then jumps up on the driver's side step and proceeds to start licking my window. Then the witch lady starts smacking my window with the palm of her hand, over and over. The dude starts telling me to open up.
Hey boy, open up. Come on now, open up. We're friendly. What you got in this trailer of yours? Anything good? Open up, boy.
Now, I feel threatened. I pull out my pistol. The chick immediately disappears off my passenger side step, but the dude laughs, jumps up and down on my step, then grins, touches his finger to his nose, and jumps off my step. I fired my truck and took the hell off, and I never did see any headlights following me. Thank God. This happened a little more than a year ago. It mostly pisses me off now that this guy scared me the way he did. I was 25 at the time, but I'm a short female and am often mistaken for much younger. It seems to be a continuing theme that I noticed. I worked as a cashier at a pharmacy until about 10 PM. I was usually left alone the entire time at the front of the store to ring up and assist customers while my supervisor worked in the back, unloading shipments and such. I always hated this setup. It was just creepy. We got a lot of weirdos after dark, including a guy that had me print off pictures of his daughter's birthday because he didn't understand the machine. And the pictures all turned out to be his and someone else's private parts. I managed not to give that guy the reaction that he wanted, which was embarrassing. I just threw the memory card out of the door and dared him to tell my manager why, because I was about to have him on the phone anyway. Not scary, but just gross and stupid. But this other guy, he would come in most days and just walk around the store. Occasionally, he'd buy a Gatorade, but mostly just walk around, and sometimes I'd catch him staring at me. We called him Sir Eyeballs. When this happened, I'd call my supervisor up to the front, and that's when the man would buy his drink and leave. He was about 30, white, average height and build, but still bigger than me, and had long brown hair. He'd never say anything, and I'd never think of him unless he was actually in the store. One night, I was at the front alone, hole-punching ads behind the counter, and heard the automatic doors open. I spouted my usual greeting without looking up from my work. I got no reply but felt a presence in front of me and quickly looked up. It was Sir Eyeballs. "Oh, sorry, hi. You ready to check out?" "You're pretty." He then reaches out and touches my hand. Of course, I pull away. With shifty eyes and looking behind him to see if we were alone, he said, "What? You're always so pretty and look so nice for just being at work. You don't have to try so hard. I've noticed you for a while. Why do they make you work alone?" I know I don't have to explain myself, but trying so hard is apparently wearing foundation, mascara, my work uniform, and my hair in a ponytail. Oh, and my wedding rings. I told him straight up not to touch me, and I wasn't alone, and grabbed the phone next to me to page my supervisor. I used to giggle and didn't know how to handle unwanted attention, but I learned that being clear and confident was usually enough to deter it. But not this time. His face changed from creepy smile to straight up pissed. I turned my head to look for the page button, and he took that moment to reach across the counter and yanked my head back by my ponytail. Just a giant fucking yank. I heard some of my hair rip out and I screamed, "Don't fucking touch me!" He smacked the counter with both hands, and then we heard my supervisor's keys jingling up the aisles as he ran to the front of the store. "Fuck, you bitch. You're just a bitch. I don't even care, you stupid bitch. Etc., etc., he said, calmly as he walked out of the store. My supervisor, a big guy but not a moron, locked the door and called the police, and after that, I told him what happened. I sat in the office until my livid husband showed up and took me home to cry. They were able to identify the guy from our surveillance tape. Apparently, he had similar incidences at a local mall, but this was the worst. I'm not sure, but hopefully it was enough to arrest him since I never saw him again. I should have pressed charges, but I didn't think about it until much later. I quit 2 months later after that. They never scheduled me with another person or changed anything at all to prevent something like that from happening again. In fact, the store manager just advised me not to be so friendly with customers when I worked alone, to not give the wrong idea. Yeah, seriously. I did stop wearing any kind of makeup the rest of the time I worked there, and I just kept my head down. I have pretty bad anxiety anyway, and felt like throwing up during every shift. Screw that guy. So, to start this experience off, I'll tell you a little bit about myself. My name is Matthew. I'm almost 15 years old now, and am currently living in New York. Besides what I'm about to tell you, my life was, and has been, pretty quiet and tame, since I don't live in a relatively bad neighborhood. Sure, there are kids older than me that will smoke weed or get into fights, but honestly, I'd be hard-pressed to find a high school that doesn't have at least one of those two, as long as it's a public one anyway. When this experience happened, it was January of 2012. My parents had gone out with my little brother for some class play. My parents had left me home alone since the celebration would only be for an hour, and the nearest police department was right next to my little brother's school, which was a 2 or 3 minute drive from our house. Back when I was that young, I did as I do today. I mostly played video games, watched TV, and played with any toys that I had in our basement, which had been converted into a playroom very recently. My parents had been nervous about leaving me home alone, and would have taken me along if I hadn't been whining and begging them not to make me go. Eventually, they caved, and they headed out around 3. There was a pretty mild snowstorm going on, but it had just been reported, so the school couldn't move the date quickly enough. Before my mum left, she told me not to go outside at all, not to open the door, and told me to call 911 if anything happened. I was really only half listening though, mostly because I already knew the basics of what to do and what not to do, so I'd been left home alone before, when my mum went down to the block to grab milk or something if we desperately needed it. For the first 20 minutes of my parents being gone, I was sitting in the den, which was the ground level. The way the desk was, my back was to a huge window that someone could walk up to. You only needed to walk up the driveway and look inside to see me on the little desk chair. I was tapping away at the keyboard, probably playing Minecraft or something, when I heard the doorbell ring, followed by a deep voice, saying,
Excuse me.
Now, I was only 9, so instantly, I got a bit scared. I slowly got out of the chair and crept upstairs to look at the front door. Our door has one of those windows that you can't really see through. It's very diamond looking, with lots of edges in it, unless you went right up to it. However, I could make out the silhouette of a tall man. I went around the little wall that was separating the stairs from the den up to the kitchen, and slowly went up. Unfortunately, the stairs that led up to the bedroom are extremely loud and creak. I tried to jump over the first 2 steps, but had to step on the second one, causing a loud creak to be heard. And the man seemed to notice, and rang the doorbell again.
Is someone in there?
The man asked as he started to jiggle the knob. I continued as quietly as I could up the stairs, and eventually I made it to my room. I shut the locked door and hid under my bed, and for the longest time it was silent. Then I remembered that my mum would want me to call the police if anything happened. I was about to crawl out to get the phone, when suddenly the window in the den had been broken, and the man had crawled inside. Quickly, I stuffed myself back under the bed, trying not to cry. I heard footsteps walking around in the kitchen. Then, the creaking of the stairs came about. The creaking stopped as he got to the top floor and started going through the bedrooms. First, my parents' room, then my brother's, and then the footsteps came to my door, and I heard the doorknob jiggle as the man tried to open the door. The lock restricted the knob though, and the man knocked.
Hey kid, I've got games in my car.
He said, slowly, as if he were making it up as he talked.
You know, like Mario and stuff. If you come out, you can have them all.
Now I was young, but not stupid. I remained silent. But whoever it was then did something I didn't expect. He started running into and kicking the door to my bedroom. The 5th time he rammed into it, the door fell into the room with a loud crash. I was able to see his feet as he walked around the room. After a minute or two, he looked under the bed, and I shit you not, he looked dead at me. He spotted me instantly and smiled.
There you are.
I screamed and tried to crawl away, but the man grabbed my leg and pulled me out. He carried me downstairs, me kicking and screaming. He grabbed a bottle of something that I can assume now to be chloroform, and he put it onto a rag and placed it over my mouth and nose. Within seconds, I was out cold. I woke up slowly, dazed, looking around as my vision adjusted to the bright surroundings of where I was. Not knowing where I was, I started to panic, until someone grabbed my arm. It was my mum. I was in the hospital. Apparently, the man, whose name was revealed to be James, had been carrying me out to the car he'd driven to my house. He'd seen me playing out in the yard earlier that day and planned to break in the middle of the night and kidnap me and my little brother. When he saw that my parents had left, he came in earlier, and after he'd knocked me out, he tried to take me to his car. Luckily, my neighbour had heard my screams and he came out with his pistol, since he was a police officer, and stopped the guy before he could take off with me. When the police went to investigate his house, they found nothing at first. However, when they searched his laptop, they found hundreds of videos and photos of child porn. I can only imagine what he planned to do with me, and my 5-year-old brother at the time. The freak got serious jail time. I forget how much, but it was definitely at least 25 years or something. My mum didn't let me stay home alone again until I was 12. I've kind of moved past this experience now, but it did lead to me being extremely paranoid. I haven't been professionally diagnosed with it, but I thought I heard the doorknob jiggling around a week ago, and I took a knife and hid in my bathroom for 3 hours straight until my parents got home. So yeah, this experience has definitely affected me, but I've just tried to forget it. So yeah, this was the time that I was nearly kidnapped by a stranger, and I would not call it a stretch to say that he was probably planning to rape me. So, it would be helpful to Google image search Flindration Tunnel while I tell you this story. I'm a 22-year-old male, and I live 3 miles from that in a small West Virginian town. It's partly underneath a short stretch of the highway I've driven 1,000,000 times. Now, I've lived in this town my whole life, and I've been into the paranormal since I can remember. It's fascinated me from a young age, and that's why I was shocked when a close friend told me about it 4 years ago, and I had never heard about it. I had just turned 19. I'll start with the geography first. I'll try to explain the layout. Once you drive over the tunnel on the highway, not 300 yards past it, there's a sign and a right turn into a side street. There's a 100-yard dirt road named Flindration Road. You follow it, pull up to a patch of grass and a swinging gate, surrounded by 5 or 6 2-foot-tall sections of phone pole sticking out of the ground around the trail, preventing cars from driving through. And then, you have a 200-yard walk ahead of you. The tunnel itself is about 3,000 feet long. It runs northwest to southeast. The backside of the tunnel runs directly under the highway, and around 300 yards away leads to an old house and a gate at the end of the path. At the top of the hill on the front end, there's an old graveyard with graves, dating as far back as the 1870s. Halfway from the start of the trail of Flindration Road where you park, and the front mouth of the tunnel, is a 13-foot wooden bridge. This is where the foreboding feeling hits you, especially at night. Over the years, I've done a fair amount of online research and talked to some older people around my town. Here's an unofficial history from what I can gather. It's known as Flindration Tunnel, but its real name is the Brandy Gap Tunnel. The tunnel itself is about 20 feet across and 30 feet from the ground to the ceiling. The small graveyard I mentioned stops somewhere between 10 to 15 feet above the roof. When they went to build it in the 1930s, the railroad company cut right through to the hill to make it and were plagued by problems from the start. While digging through the hill, a few of the older graves fell through and landed in the tunnel, and instead of being disposed of properly, were lazily tossed aside as garbage. Not many years later, the back end of the tunnel also became a popular spot by a local group of Klansmen to lynch victims. They would tie a noose to a tree just above the lip of the tunnel and make them jump, leaving them to hang. Fast forward to the 1950s. Labourers for the railroad company are making repairs to the interior of the middle of the tunnel as a train comes through. 2 workers are struck and killed. I've also been told by 3 different people who have never met that 2 children were also killed in some unspecified way, but there's nothing online about this. The friend that told me about the tunnel, Daniel, is 4 years older than me, and a no-nonsense type. He's kind of introverted, and he and my older brother went to school together, and he started hanging out at my house about 11 years ago. He's like an older brother to me now. One Saturday in October, Daniel told a friend from the job he had at the time about it, and they decided to go to the tunnel that night. He gave me a call and told me what was going on, and that night, around midnight, we drove down for the first time. We parked, walked, crossed the bridge and made it to the front entrance, where they both lit a cigarette. We decided that we were going to stop in the middle of the tunnel and wait to see if we could hear or see anything. Daniel had the idea that we should go in intervals. One person would start walking through, then when he's 20 feet or so in, another goes. and then finally the other person. I ended up in the middle. Now, this place is dark as hell in there in the daytime, let alone at midnight in October. Honestly, I could barely see my hand in front of my face. All I could see were the faint embers of the cigarettes 20 feet on either end of me. We decided not to turn on the flashlight function on our phones to walk through, because we wanted to get the full creepy effect. Besides, it was a straight shot. It's not like we were going to get lost or anything. The tunnel was cold and damp, with an overpowering echo. We were all being loud, laughing and joking, until we entered. Now the only sounds were our light footsteps in the mud. I'm not going to lie, I was a little intimidated by the structure. We finally made it to the middle, and we leaned up against the wall, waiting. What for? We didn't know. But this is where things got scary. At this time, we were all about 10 feet apart. Daniel, having gone in first, was on the closest to the back end of the tunnel. He turns towards me and whispers in a serious but low tone, "I'm not fucking with you, but there's someone down there." I looked, and it was plain to see. A faint black silhouette at the very end of the tunnel, contrasted against what little moonlight there was. A chill ran up my spine like I hadn't felt in a long time. And then, in that moment, I shit you not, a hand placed itself on my shoulder. I couldn't see it, but I sure as hell felt it. It couldn't have been Daniel or his friend from work, as they were both too far away. I knew where they were because I could see their cigarettes on either end of me, and every small step that we took on the muddy trail echoed through the tunnel. In other words, I would have heard one of them sneak up to me. The entire exchange, from the minute he said he saw something to the minute something held my shoulder, was about 30 seconds. I got the fuck out of there, and those two weren't far behind me. We were 900 feet inside, and running out of it took about 90 seconds at full sprint. We reached the car and got back onto the highway, where I explained to them that not seconds after Daniel pointed out the figure at the end of the tunnel, my left shoulder was touched by a very real hand. It was almost 3 months before I went back. I've gone 5 times since then, and I always get that chill down my back from it. Even in the summertime, the cold breeze blowing through it from the valley at the end hits you, and you feel at the mercy of whatever is in there. I always make sure to take a flashlight, just in case, and I make sure not to joke and carry on after we step out of the safety of the vehicle. Again, just in case. You never know what's watching you. This story didn't happen to me, but to a very close male friend of 7 years. I was hanging out with him and a couple of other friends, and we were talking about our creepy experiences. Here is the story from his perspective. A little bit of background. I was 16 years old when this happened, living in Amman City, the capital of Jordan in the Middle East. I was in high school. I used to weigh 85 kilos and was about 192 centimeters tall. I was a calm but intimidating person if I wanted to be, but I never really messed with anyone unless I was provoked to. I just got off school and decided I wanted to go downtown because I was bored and I didn't want to stay at home, and I wanted to get some DVDs and games to enjoy later. So I decided to take the bus as I wanted to save some money, but I took a taxi to the bus stop, which was about less than 10 minutes by car. When I stopped a coming taxi, inside the vehicle appeared a light-skinned man with black greasy hair, wearing a worn-out dark green shirt and a pair of jeans. He looked to be between the ages of 30 and 34, and he addressed me through the passenger window and asked, "Hey, where do you want to go?" I need to go to the bus stop that takes me downtown. It's only 10 minutes away." "Well, I can take you downtown if you like. I'm going to be passing that area anyway. I can drop you there and you don't have to pay me if you want." At this point, a red flag should have gone off in my head, but I thought that this man just wanted to be kind, and I really didn't want to go through the hassle of taking more than one trip, so I decided to hop into his car. We were on our way. Looking back on it now, this was a big fucking mistake. Now, there are different ways to head to downtown, and I only knew a couple of ways. As the man was driving, he started to take different routes that I'd never seen before. Still no alarm bells started ringing, as I only assumed that he was taking a shortcut to get away from traffic or something. By this point, 20 minutes had passed and I began to feel uneasy. Usually from the bus route I take, it only needs about 20 minutes to get downtown when there's little to no traffic, but I brushed it off again. Then, suddenly, the man began to speak in this calm yet suspicious tone. "Hey, do you mind if I use your phone? I want to see if you have any videos or music that I can send via Bluetooth." I found this to be a strange request, but seeing as the man was giving me a free ride, and the fact that I didn't have anything private in my phone, I handed it to him, as I didn't want to be impolite and was just trying to break the awkward atmosphere. He played with the phone a little bit, then proceeded to put my phone with his under the empty space of the driver's door handle. Doubt began to circle my mind, and I felt vulnerable without my phone. Yet, despite all of this, I silenced my doubts and stared to the window outside. The feeling of dread and uneasiness only grew more as I was not able to make out where we are exactly anymore. As the man kept driving, I only started to see empty road, with only desert on both right and left sides, with only a couple of old, worn-out rusty shipping containers. It is getting darker at this point, and this is where things got even creepier. The man proceeds to pick up his phone and began to speak to someone at the end of the line, shouting the following with an angry voice.
"I'm coming to fuck you up, motherfucker. You better prepare yourself. I'm coming to beat you up, you son of a bitch."
As soon as the man ended the phone call, I knew something was absolutely wrong. Looking more closely at the phone he was holding, I was able to recognize that the phone he had was a type of phone that doesn't have Bluetooth. Alarm bells started ringing loudly in my head at this point. The whole call came out of nowhere, and I began to feel dread, and the fear was absolutely real now. I asked him for my phone, growing nervous and impatient with each word escaping my mouth. He looked at me with this strange and annoyed look, and said, "I just wanted to see what you got on your phone." By this point, I'd had enough, and I sternly told him to give me my phone, the anger and fear barely contained in my voice. He hesitantly obliged, after muttering back and forth, and I just knew that I had to get the hell out of this car. Feeling a rush of adrenaline, I decided to pretend that I was talking to my parents, and created a scenario where there was an emergency and that I had to get back to. So I began telling the man that I needed to return back immediately, and told him to drop me off right here and right now. As I was seeing an upcoming traffic light, I knew that this was my only chance of escape. I was not sticking around any longer to know where this man was taking me, to who knows where. As soon as the man stopped at the traffic light, I spoke to him in the most intimidating voice I could to open the passenger door. Luckily there was a couple of cars that stopped next to us, and thank God the man responded with a menacing look and pressed the unlock button. I got out of the car faster than you could say, "Fuck this shit, I'm out," and went to the small run-out coffee break stop in the middle of nowhere as the taxi sped off. I went inside and asked the server if downtown was close by, out of breath, with sweat dripping off my forehead. The server looked at me with a confused and irritated face, and said, You know you're out of the capital, right? You're heading to the city of Zaka." Shit, I thought. Fucking shit. I proceeded to call my parents to pick me up from the middle of nowhere, and God knows I'm not taking a taxi to get back home, or anytime soon. Thinking about it a while later, I think the man planned on kidnapping me from the start. He tried to take my phone away so I couldn't call for help, and proceeded to pretend that he was having a fight with someone on the phone to secretly message his buddies that he was close by. I was a skeptic before the events of the story I'm about to tell you. My single mum raised me on first-hand tales of ghosts, aliens, and Ouija boards and the like. I desperately wanted to believe in all of it, but I never really had my own otherworldly experience to really solidify anything, until one April afternoon in Buxton, Maine. It was a mild and overcast day, and my mum and I were enjoying our annual ritual of cruising from yard sale to yard sale in some of the more rural parts of the state. She enjoyed it for the scenery of cruising alongside rushing rivers, budding trees unfurling their new leaves on either side of the road, and the strange roadside sights you'd often encounter in this quaint little New England state. I was in it for the mystery. This was the home state of horror royalty Stephen King after all, which made one a little more predisposed to be a weirdo. One of my favourite topics of creepiness was abandoned buildings. Whenever we'd pass one, I'd implore my mum to pull over so I could have a closer look. Sometimes she'd be comfortable enough with me getting out for a few minutes to look around and hopefully find an entrance, and fortunately for me, that was the case that afternoon. The house was easy to find because I had been looking for it and was well versed in the signs. It had them all. The no trespassing sign on the door, grass as high as your hips, an ill-defined driveway, a knocked-over mailbox, wooden paneling greyish-green with rot, elaborate patterns of cracks and chips running along the porch columns and door frames, an ominous-looking barn towering into the sky, and a partially collapsed shed. It was beautiful. I had to get out of the car. My mum warned me to be quick because, despite the scarcity of the houses built on the road, there was a trailer tucked away under the cover of some maple trees almost directly across the street, and a number of vehicles parked in the dirt driveway. Folks in rural Maine do not take kindly to people sticking their noses where they don't belong, especially in the case of ownership. We are fiercely defensive of our neighbours when it comes to outsiders, so my mum kept her eyes and ears open as I jumped out and sloshed through the sticky springtime mud to the back of the shed. "Hurry up, I don't want anyone to see us," she shouted out of the window, though I was already halfway up the drive. Now, despite having fallen through the floor, my leg dangling above a festering basement full of jagged metal pieces jutting out from the dark water and my recent history of exploring abandoned buildings, I hesitated a little when I realized that the back wall to the shed seemed to have been broken away from the rest of the structure and warped in its neglect, leaving a perfect, if not slightly narrow upside-down V-shaped entrance for me to slip through. Once inside, my eyes adjusted to the dim light as the dust and the sediment swirled around me in the stale air. I delighted in pouring through some old boxes near the front of the shed, from textbooks and old greeting cards from the 60s for a bit. There wasn't really much else to see, but having found this spontaneous treasure of a house, I was hesitant to leave. I stood at the back of the spacious shed and took it all in, until...
Hey, get out of here!
My internal organs did a dance as my heart leapt into my throat and my stomach dropped to my feet. The voice sounded angry. It sounded distant, but also far too close to make sense. But the split second after I'd heard it, I followed the command in record time. I shot through the upside-down V, which I'd previously had to wiggle through, so as not to be assaulted with splinters, rusty nails and cobwebs, and ran like my life depended on it, back down to the car. I ripped open the door and threw myself into the passenger seat, breathless. Okay, let's go. Who was that? My mum looked at me and slowly blinked, her face blank. Who was what? The voice. You know. Did a car drive by or something? Who was that? My mum placed her hand on the ignition with a shake of her head. I don't know what you're talking about, but we should go. Mum, seriously, don't do this. If you're fucking with me, it's not nice. That scared the shit out of me. She promised me that she wasn't fucking with me, as she sometimes liked to do in order to get a rise out of me, and add a little mysticism to my life. I took her response for being authentic, sincere, at this point, a little freaked out, which opened up the floor for me to have a freak out of my own. When I was in the shed, someone yelled, "Hey, get out of here." The voice was male, and it sounded aggressive, but almost like they were whispering at the same time. It sounded like it was right next to me, I swear. I was inclined to believe my mum, especially since she was being hypervigilant of all sights and sounds as she sat outside the house waiting for me. I couldn't explain what I had experienced. It gave me a little jolt of energy for the next few days as I told my friends who were predisposed to believing in such things the story in great detail. It was an afternoon much like the first few weeks, later when I invited my friend and fellow urban explorer to drive to the house with me. Harper had a penchant for photography. We had nothing but time, so I thought it was worth a revisit. We took a photo of the window of the barn because it had some dead creeping vines twisting in thick brittle ropes around the wooden frame. It would certainly make a nice, spooky shot. We pulled it up on viewfinder, which is when we discovered a distinct wispy-like shape like that of a smoke, but more textured, wrapped around the right side of the window, curling down beneath it and out of frame. That was enough to make us push through the thorny tangle of weeds and fallen trees and debris, get to the window to look through it. I was the first to peer in. Harper. Shit. Holy shit, Harper. You're not going to believe this. You have to see this. As I saw it, made me want to leave the property faster than my trembling legs would allow me. It was to being surrounded on all sides by thorny brambles, ready to scratch and scrape and snag our clothes and skin. And it was probably understandable. I was feeling very antsy. On the other side of the dirty glass, and propped up against the side of the barn, sat 3 gravestones. Names were difficult to read. It was clear from the level of deterioration and the discoloration on the bottom that they had been in the ground setting and exposed to the elements for quite some time. That was it for us. I think we were both less afraid of the supernatural force at that point, and more fearful of whoever brought these gravestones here to begin with. As time passed, the Buxton House continued to be one of our favourite abandoned locations. It was the stuff of legend, and certainly one of our most exciting excursions. One summer afternoon that same year, my mum and I found ourselves driving past it. The house looked like it had been cleaned up a bit. The little shed next to the barn was completely gone now. There was a clear path from the driveway to the barn window. And of course, I just couldn't help it. I had to get out and look. And the tombstones were gone. I used to work night shift in a nursing home. It was my job, along with another aide, to check on the residents throughout the night and make sure that they were safe, clean and comfortable in 2-hour intervals. There was a woman, tiny, frail thing, but sweeter than anyone, at the end of the hallway. Her name was Gertrude. Gertie had been sick for a while, and didn't look like she would be with us much longer. She was really thin, at about 80 pounds, couldn't get out of bed or hardly move on her own, and she wasn't easily roused when she drifted off in a wheelchair. They had moved her roommate to a different hall in preparation. While doing rounds, myself and my partner tucked Gertie in, gave her some coffee on the bedside table, placed up next to her, and made sure everything was shut and put away. She was afraid of the dark, but she was alone now, without a roommate, so we would always leave her light on and dim for her. Seeing as everyone had been attended to, my partner decided to step out for a smoke break. I moved a chair to the edge of the alcove at the opposite end of the hallway, so I would be able to see every doorway, to make sure I could tell where the call lights were coming from, and make sure that I could get to someone quick enough if they got out of bed before they fell and hurt themselves. At about 2:15 in the morning, I started to hear this weird noise coming from one of the farther off rooms, so I got up and started walking down the hall. I tried to walk slowly and quietly and focus all my energy on trying to listen where the noise was coming from. It almost sounded like someone was in their bathroom, pulling out paper towels one after another, which made no sense because, 1, all of our residents needed assistance out of their beds to get to the bathroom, and 2, all of our paper towel dispensers were automatic, so you would hear the gears whirling, which here I didn't. The closer I got to the end of the hallway, the more the sound seemed to pick up speed. With about half the hallway down, I stopped when I realized the noise was coming from Gertie's room. Just as soon as the thought popped into my mind, there was a loud crash and I broke into a sprint, terrified of what could have possibly happened to her. As I entered the room, I stopped dead in my tracks. The bathroom, closet and cabinet doors were all open. Her table was flipped on its side. Coffee covered the floor and the phone had been ripped from the wall, thrown to the other side of the room. I looked at the destruction across the floor and scanned the area before my eyes met her bed. I wish to this day, years later, that they hadn't. Up on the edge of the bed was my resident, naked in the light, leaned slightly back, her legs kicking wildly as if desperately trying to set herself upright, while the top half of her body lay limp and appeared lifeless. Her arms fell behind her, and her head stretched way back, leaning to one side with a blank gaze over her eyes, looking through me. I was absolutely paralyzed with fear and couldn't move. It was as if death was staring straight at me, and I had interrupted her. After what seemed like an eternity, I shook myself of my stiffness and went to Gertie's side. I put my arms behind her back and under her legs to move her back into bed. It seemed like as soon as I touched her, her upper half came back into consciousness, and she started moving about, obviously startled. I pulled my arms away and felt some sort of wetness on them. It wasn't sweat or urine or coffee. I have no idea to this day what it was. There was no visible sign of dampness anywhere on her or her bed. As I rushed to put the gown back on her and checked to make sure that she wasn't soiled or more importantly hurt anywhere, she craned her neck back to look up at the ceiling corner of the room behind her. Without her teeth, she was really hard to understand, but she spoke in an aggravated, almost angry tone of voice. She turned her head back to me and said,
"Will you take him when you leave?"
Who, Gertie?
"Your partner. He's in here. He's been in here with me all night. He's bothering me and I can't sleep. Don't you see him? He's right there, look."
She motioned to the corner. My body froze in place. I refused to move my eyes from her. I knew nothing was in the corner, but what was the chance that I'd see whatever it was she saw?
"Take him with you when you leave and let me get some rest."
Sure, Gertie. Whatever you need, as long as you're sure you're okay, was all I was able to croak out. I'm fine, just tired. I'm so very tired. Every fibre in my being screamed to run away and to leave whatever evil was hanging out in the corner of this woman's room. This is the very seldom talked about part of healthcare, especially nursing homes that we the providers are faced with. I covered her with a blanket and wished her good night and tried to walk out of the room as calmly as I could, so as not to let her know how scared I was. Once cleared of the doorway, I took off to find my nurse and my partner to show them the room in disarray and tell them the horrors of what I had just witnessed. They were puzzled, and I don't think they believed me, as I'm sure so many of you don't believe me as well. I just hope that none of you are ever in that place with death so close. It seems like when someone gets so close to meeting him, the lines between this world and ours don't seem to exist anymore. Gertie passed the following night. It was around 4 years ago now, I think. I was 25 years old and I was working with a door-to-door sales company.